Hello everyone, my name is Jean Villedieu, and I'm very excited to bring you today this webinar, Solving the Financial Crime Efficiency Puzzle, how graph technology and entity resolution can help. So let's get started. So first, a quick intro about the speakers for today's session. I'm joined by Alan and Anthony. You guys can introduce yourselves.
Hi there, thanks Sean. Hi there, I am Alan Brown. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Aptitude.
And Anthony Farina here. I lead the partner business at Senzing.
Great. As for myself, my name is Jean Villedieu. I'm one of the co-founders of Linkurious. So let's get started. So first, a quick word about Linkurious. The company itself was founded in 2013. Right now, we have two offices, one in France and another one in the US. We are a team of 50 plus persons, and on a daily basis, more than 4,000 users are using Linkurious Enterprise to conduct complex investigations. So for today's agenda, we are going to start with a quick introduction. Then we'll talk about entity resolution in financial crime, zooming in on that topic. Afterwards, we'll talk about regulation, cost, and opportunities related to this. And then we dive into solving the efficiency puzzle and dive into Aptitude's approach to this problem. And after that, we have got a bit of a demonstration of the solution, which I'm very excited about. So let's kick things off. First, I want to talk a little bit about understanding how understanding the context is critical to fight against financial crime. In a nutshell, in financial crime, understanding the context around a transaction, a client, an alert is very important to make the right decision. For example, you need that to correctly assess the risks or identify potential criminal behaviors. And in that domain, graph analytics can be very powerful. Graph analytics and visualization make it possible to apply this sort of understanding of the context at scale. And in particular, with Linkurious Enterprise, you can leverage graph analytics in two ways. First, you can use graph visualization to explore and visualize the context around the client to make quick and accurate decisions. So we see a little bit of that with the visual in this slide. We see that this client, the customer, I guess, on the left, is tied indirectly via an order, a credit card, and more entities to another fraudster. Graph visualization allows me to very quickly grasp this situation and then use it to make the right decision. For example, I can confirm or dismiss an alert, or I can go ahead and fill a suspicious activity report and more. So we talked about graph visualization. Another very important aspect that you can leverage with Linkurious Enterprise is graph analytics. And you can use graph analytics to detect complex patterns. Think, money mules network, sanction evasion schemes, and more. And you can also identify entities with risky connections. And for example, identify potential shell companies or non-clients associated with fraudsters. So that's the sort of insights of value that graph analytics and context can bring in anti-financial crime. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about entity resolution. Maybe some of you in the audience have heard of the term or not. So I think it's helpful, to lay some foundations here. First, the power of graph analytics is to help understand the context in your data is only as good and as effective as the quality of the data you have. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say. The better the entity resolution, the more accurate the understanding of the context, and the more effective you become at spotting potential risks. Here we can see a bit of an example of that with the visual on the right, and we see that we have We have some records, multiple records that exist in different systems. So we have an insurance database, an external company registry, and a retail banking database. And we are able to identify that there are some connections here, namely that john.smith@gmail.com is the same address as john.smith@gmail.com, and that there are two persons called John Smith. Making these connections can help me figure out that we are potentially talking about a single person here, a single entity, and that is going to be helpful for all the visualization and the analytics that I will put in place. That's why entity resolution consists in the process of identifying whether records from one or multiple data sources represent the same entity, and then linking those records as we just did together with that visual that we can look at. So we have seen how important entity resolution is. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the changes that are related to entity resolution. So first, a lot of our clients start their Linkurious journey by focusing on internal data. You think KYC information, transactional data, and they do that because there are a lot of low-hanging fruits here, and just by exploiting this data already, they can already make big progress in terms of fighting back against fraud and money laundering. So they start with that, and they don't necessarily, dive into entity resolution as a topic. And one of the reasons for that is that the graph approach naturally helps perform entity resolution by surfacing intermediary connections between nodes. For example, if two records happen to share a common piece of information, such as an address, an email, a phone number, they are going to be it's going to be possible to spot that simply by looking and analyzing the data as a graph. And then there are some graph algorithms out there that also help with entity resolution. Think the weakly connected component algorithm, the cosine seniority algorithm. These algorithms can help do some deduplication, some entity resolution. So I would say that this is where our clients start, and then oftentimes, as organizations mature, they want to enhance their anti-financial crime arsenal. And then that's really where the question of integrating third-party data sources comes up. And when I'm talking about third-party data sources, I'm thinking about sanctions lists, company registries, data that is provided by third-party data providers, but also data that's available out there publicly. And this is typically the tipping point. That's when it starts to make sense to add advanced entity resolution capabilities. Otherwise, the risk is simply to pollute your internal data with noise and basically defeat the purpose of integrated external data in the first place. So that's where a lot of our clients, find themselves, I would say, in their graph journey, in their journey with Linkurious, and that's why we are very excited to partner up with Aptitude and with Senzing. And with that, over to you, Anthony.
Thank you, Jean. It's a pleasure to be on the panel today. And as you indicated in your remarks, advanced entity resolution can play a massive role in improving an organization's data quality. And with better data quality, organizations can effectively visualize and leverage connected data to make real-time decisions. I'll spend a few minutes just sharing a little bit more about Senzing, who we are, and then we'll get into some more of the specifics around the entity resolution challenges. But first, Senzing was founded in 2016. We're privately held. We're a US-based software company. We've got a growing list of end customers and partners across North America, EMEA and APJ, commonly deployed inside financial services, but also healthcare, also information services, and a lot of public sector work as well. Our team of engineers are the leading experts in entity resolution. They've been working together for decades on solving some of the most complex entity resolution problems. ER is all we do. And the product is an API that helps developers make it easy to integrate world-class entity resolution into their workflows and architectures. I'll spend a couple minutes now just describing a little bit more about what Senzing refers to by entity resolution. And Jean, I know you touched on this. Entity resolution is the process of recognizing when distinct data records relate to the same real-world entity despite having been described differently, or conversely, the process of recognizing when data records do not resolve to the same entity despite having been described similarly. Entities can be people, customers, account holders, prospects, or synthetic or fake identities. They can be companies, vendors, suppliers. They can be even things such as vessels or airplanes. In the dark blue records here, these are matched even though the names are expressed and the addresses a little bit differently. In the teal box here, we have an attribute that indicates Robert Smith Sr., which indicates that they are not the same entity, and create a new entity 2 here. This basic concept is important because it's more powerful than record matching, not only to delineate these 3 records into 2 entities, but maybe most importantly is to remember that these entities are related or possibly related. So when you combine entity resolution with graph visualizations, remembering how entities are related to one another offers a significant superpower for data intensive applications. And entities become the nodes and the relationships become the edges in graph visualizations. So now I'll go a little bit further into some of these kind of persistent data challenges that have made entity resolution hard for a long time. As Jean mentioned, there's different data sources, whether it's your internal company data resources, maybe your credit card database, your mortgage database, your HR database. They're formatted differently, but maybe they have records that do relate to the same entity there. Also, when you're bringing in data and enriching your first-party data with third-party data, that's often challenging because it's in different formats as well. Maybe the name fields are separated, or they're all in one field, or otherwise. There's natural data variations. You know, I could be Anthony Farina, I could be Anthony with my middle initial, I could be Tony. Phone numbers could have country codes, area codes. There's a lot of differences in natural data variations. There's going to be data entry errors, misspellings, and otherwise that get hard, more difficult to match. And there's cultural differences as well, parsing data or parsing names or addresses, not only in English, but Arabic, Asian cultures, and others are a big challenge. There's going to be temporal data changes. So you move addresses, you change phone numbers. Those types of real-time updates are difficult to tackle in entity resolution. And of course, we're talking about financial crime. But whether it's bad guy hunting, as we term it, or fraudsters, or even deliberately obfuscating your identity to marketers, this notion of channel separation makes entity resolution very difficult. And Senzing has approached these challenges with a very innovative API and product. Senzing's API, as I mentioned, is entity-centric. So it provides much more accurate and flexible matching than otherwise. So you'd have the 360 view. It's always going to be self-learning and self-correcting. So the API and the libraries are tuned out of the box. The system's going to get smarter. The more data you feed it, the more context is delivered. This is also important because of entity-centric. You can learn things as you ingest that may be unmatched records to entities. And this becomes even important for situations where you need to do deletes due to GDPR or other data administration tasks. Importantly, Senzing's API can ingest and resolve large data sets in real time. So it can feed alerts and insights downstream to real-time decision intelligence systems. And in this era of AI and other trends in the market, explainability of results is essential in order to trust the data when you're making decisions. So Senzing has exploratory data analysis tools in the API. You can ask it why matches were made, why not, or even how records were matched and linked. There's minimal data prep, so no pre-processing. Some of our customers have added data sources in hours or days versus maybe other solutions where this can be more timely. It could be weeks or measured in months. And some of our production systems today are running tens of billions of records and hundreds of millions of updates per day. So Senzing is really built for scale. As I mentioned, ER is all we do. We have an API. Before handing it over to Alan, Senzing has a partner-led go-to-market strategy, which is why we're excited to partner with Linkurious and Aptitude here. The entity resolution API is designed for ISV and solution providers to leverage our capabilities to create new and differentiated offerings and deliver business outcomes for their customers. So excited to turn it over to Alan. He'll tell you a little bit more about what Aptitude has done with Senzing and Linkurious. Over to you, Alan. Alan, you're on mute.
Wonderful start. Yeah, just a little introduction to Aptitude. We were formed in 2014. We are a data consultancy. We are registered in UK, Spain, and Portugal. And we have deep financial services experience, and we work quite heavily in regulated sectors. We particularly specialize in customer identity solutions, supporting fraud and financial crime. So I'm here today to talk to you about how we improve the efficiencies of fraud and financial crime programs and ask the question, do you really know your customer? Now, firms are investing millions of pounds annually into inefficient financial crime programs. And what we don't think they're doing is really addressing the underlying issues that plague their productivity. Now, these three key issues for me are poor data quality, inefficient processes, and a lack of external data monitoring. Now, poor data quality, a lack of proactive updating of customer information, data controls to prevent your customer information from becoming out of date, inefficient processes, many manual breakpoints in the fraud and financial crime journey, passing, copying and pasting data between unintegrated systems, repetition, tick box exercises, real challenges there around making your end-to-end journey for financial crime detection and prevention more efficient. And the last point, pretty crucial to today, is a lack of external data monitoring. Post the onboarding process with customers, firms rarely monitor for corroborated sources of third-party data in order to truly understand the risk associated with their customers. And this brings huge challenges. What we see is huge volumes of false alerts, PEPs, event-driven reviews, sanctions, transaction monitoring, adverse media, leading to poor staff retention. Staff are overwhelmed. They don't have the tools and the technology to do their job properly, and they feel like they're not really adding value within the organisation. Millions being spent with consultants to try and remediate large backlogs and to try and get back on top of these huge backlogs of customer reviews. A lot of duplicated effort across teams, like we say, copying and pasting between one workflow tool to another, capturing information that's already probably captured elsewhere within the organisation. And we're seeing increasing regulatory fines and reputational damage to firms. It's a highly regulated environment. And unfortunately, despite all of the above, high-profile fraud still occurs, and it occurs regularly, and we see it quite regularly within the media. So this is a highly regulated environment. We're seeing here in the UK, for example, that the Financial Conduct Authority regularly writing to the CEOs of retail banks, identifying common issue control failings and weaknesses within financial crime programs. And the message is pretty clear. You must do better. We need to improve your controls around customer risk assessments, due diligence, transaction monitoring, suspicious activity reporting. And this is leading to quite a significant number of remediation programs where banks ultimately just have far too many customers. They don't, that require due diligence checks to be completed on them. They don't have sufficient operational capacity within the bank. And ultimately, this is leading to large backbooks of customers that need to be remediated. And the common approach to this, to resolving this, is to outsource it. This is the first thing that banks typically look to do is we have a huge backbook. We don't have the operational capacity. they engage with a large consultancy firm to outsource the back book in order to try and get them back onto an even keel. Now, unfortunately, this isn't addressing the underlying issues, the issues that we described in the earlier slides. They're not still investing in data quality to prevent these issues from happening again, not adopting a risk-based approach to remediation, to financial crime, very much still following the periodic review process that really got them into this problem in the first place. And the biggest thing for me is not really investing in building a single intelligent data platform where you really truly understand contextually the risk associated with your customer. Now, if we can get to that position, then obviously we can solve a number of these challenges. So how do you move away from periodic reviews? For those of you that aren't familiar with the process, hopefully you all are. A periodic review is effectively you risk score your customer, potentially high, medium, or low risk, and then you'll conduct a customer due diligence review on that customer on a periodic basis. So typically high risk customers are reviewed every 12 months, medium risk perhaps every 3 years, low risk customers probably every 5 years. The issue with periodic reviews is that you have to touch every customer. So in that 5-year cycle, every customer will have a review, and that has a significant operational burden associated with it. Also, we have to really consider that the vast majority of the customers won't change. Their information doesn't change. They aren't risky customers. They have fairly static and consistent lives. Their businesses operate consistently. And really, whenever you conduct a periodic review for a customer, there is some customer friction there. You have to ask them to represent information that they've probably already given you. Now, the benefit of moving to what we call perpetual KYC, where effectively you're only monitoring for changes in a customer's risk profile, and then you will conduct a review at that point in time. It's a significantly less number of reviews that you'll conduct, but also it brings a large number of benefits. You can monitor trends in customer behavior and customer risk because you're periodically sampling external and third-party and internal data on a frequent basis. You will detect financial crime and fraud risks earlier because you have this perpetual monitoring of these data sources. Your reviews will be more effective and more interesting on the basis of you're only conducting a review when the risk changes. You're not conducting a review because you're ticking a box because you have to do it on a periodic basis. And this ultimately leads to reduced customer friction. And ultimately, and this is the very important thing, will reduce your operational costs because you're conducting less reviews, you're conducting, and your skilled KYC analysts are actually focusing on real cases, again, then improving staff retention. Industry figures are showing about, if you can move to perpetual KYC, that you can reduce your operational costs by about 40 to 80%. Aptitude conducted a remediation program. We implemented a solution for a remediation program for a large tier 1 bank in the last 18 months. And we automated remediation checks using third-party data and built a risk-based approach to remediating those customers through technology. And we saved them close to £100 million. So these figures are absolutely realistic. If we can get to a position where we're perpetually monitoring for changes in third-party data, and we can integrate that with our internal data and build this intelligent single customer view, then we can very much drive those efficiencies into the fraud and financial crime processes. I've pulled an example together here. I'm going to quickly go through it. But effectively, we have 10 customers. They're different entity types: consumers, charities, registered companies like limited companies, sole traders. The question I would ask is, how many of these events would you detect? There's 6 customers there that nothing has happened. In a world of perpetual KYC, we wouldn't have to conduct a review for those customers because we're monitoring for changes. Nothing has changed, and there's no value in us asking them to represent the same information. But if we're monitoring for information like their credit score declining, registrations on public bodies like the gambling commissions and charities registers, monitoring for changes in credit account turnover, monitoring for example, the makeup and structure of a company, whether that be the ownership or the directors or such that are registered with the company, the nationalities of participants in an organisation. These are all things that we should be monitoring for. And I would say that typically we just see transaction monitoring, adverse media, potentially some PIPs and sanctions, but nothing really beyond that. There's a whole variety of data sources that we could be monitoring for that would allow us to move towards this periodic review process. So how do you move to a solution where you can provide a periodic review service? You've got three options, really. You can try and buy a packaged solution, so packaged software. You can outsource to a managed service provider who potentially offers that type of capability. Or the approach that I'm going to describe today is our approach, which is ultimately a customized data platform build that we would build for a particular client, that's very specific to their needs, but provides all of the capabilities to build this effective, efficient fraud and financial crime solution. Packaged software, commercial off-the-shelf software, still requires integration effort, still requires customization to make it work for your organization, and they typically come with quite restrictive licenses in terms of the specific to to a particular use case. So you don't really own the underlying data and then be able to leverage that for a multitude of use cases within your organization. They all still come with infrastructure costs, training overheads, and the likes of any solution. So they're certainly not a quick fix. And I think many organizations think if they buy a solution that they don't have to go through the pain of building one, but the integration effort can almost be the same as building something from scratch using component technology that you may already have. On the managed service side, these typically are very highly manual, and they're often charged on the basis of the volume of individuals, analysts that are deployed by the managed service provider. And because consulting firms don't want to cannibalize their own revenue, they're unlikely to try and make them super efficient, which means they can then sell more bodies, which means that they can generate more revenue. So again, they tend to not be the most automated. You still have training overheads that are still heavily based on bodies, and consequently you have quality assurance issues in terms of training up your team. And again, going back to the point, it's not addressing the underlying data quality issues that we think are hugely important in delivering these fraud and financial crime programs. Now, Aptitude's approach, which I'm about to talk you through, is very much a customized solution. So automation-led, highly automated, adopting industry standards, with data quality at heart. We've designed a plug-and-play reference architecture which can work with your technology. We can integrate your technology with the best-in-breed technology components that are available in industry to deliver some of the capabilities we've discussed today around entity resolution, data quality, visualization, non-restrictive licensing. Your data is your asset. The data that we pull together in a single customer view for customer data can be used for fraud and financial crime, but there's a multitude of use cases that an organization can leverage off of that data asset that really can drive intelligent decision making into a bank. And that's what we believe that every single organization should have at the heart of their organization, is this intelligent data platform that has a huge variety of internal and third-party data, and ultimately that has to be fully customizable. So here's our solution. So I'm going to talk you through this. There's two layers. There's our 7-step process, or our reference architecture, the blueprint effectively that we have followed in order to design this. The 7-step process starts with data ingestion. So you have to be able to ingest your internal and third-party data into your platform. We would then apply a standardized industry data model, so a domain-aligned data model for the solution. Data quality checks get integrated into the integration layer. So we have to ensure that data is consistent, is accurate, is complete, and standardized. And again, this helps us with the entity resolution process that we're about to come up to. Entity resolution, we've described this in a lot of detail with Jean and Anthony so far. We perform entity resolution to match your internal and third-party data together. Once you've got to this stage, you have a really curated data asset that we can build into a graph database, and we can apply validation, risk scoring, visualization, alerting, etc. So we have this end-to-end architecture, that gives us this complete picture of our customers. I'll take a quick breather and go on to the actual technical solution. So we have implemented this in our engineering lab, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you today, which hopefully you'll all enjoy. So what we have is we've got data coming in from real-time data coming in from Companies House, which is the corporate registry in the UK. We've also been provided data by a couple of our friends at Experian and Open Sanctions, which have been able to give us a really comprehensive set of customer information. So Experian act as a data provider as well as a credit reference agency in the UK. So they've aggregated data from over 20 data sources into a single data feed from like the Financial Conduct Authority, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, Charities Commission, Gambling Commission, etc., into this single data feed. And we've got data from Open Sanctions, which is a fantastic data resource, which gives you PEPs and sanctions, as well as criminal watch list data, etc., all into a single feed aligned to an industry standard data model. So we're using follow the money data model. We're starting to see a lot of data sources that conform to this data model. Very much we have modeled our solution around this as well, which allows us to integrate all this data into our solution. Once we have our data in our data lake, we then apply data quality checks and standardization of that data. Now, we're using a tool called Aperture Data Studio, which is an Experian product, in order to do this. And this allows us to then feed high quality data into our solution and into our entity resolution product. Now, obviously, we're using Senzing. You've heard a lot about it. It's a fantastic tool. Best in class entity resolution, easy to integrate into your financial crime journey. And that was really one of the attractions for Senzing for us, was that this is a product that we could build in, we could integrate into our solution and get high quality, explainable entity resolution output out of the back of this. Now, in parallel to loading the data into Senzing, we load all of our source data into Neo4j. Neo4j is a graph database, and this allows us to structure our data in a highly related way, so we can manage the relationships between different entity types within our source data. Now, the very clever part, the interesting part, which I'm going to demonstrate to you today, is that we have a connector that is synchronizing the entity resolution results back into Neo4j. So we effectively create a metadata layer between the underlying source records. So maybe we have source records from 4, 5, 6 different sources. Senzing is telling us which of those are the same, are similar, or are related. And we publish and synchronize those relationships back into the graph so that we can then contextualize the relationships between the source records. And on top of all of that, we have Linkurious, which provides the best-in-class visualization, alerting, and investigation capability on top of the whole solution, so that we can then interact with the data and gain insights from that. Okay, so that's the description of what we've built. I'm now going to do a demo, and then we'll go on to question and answers after this. Looking at time, I'm probably not going to get through all of these, but I'll do as many of them as I possibly can. I'm going to demonstrate Aptitude's Entity Resolution Explainability plugin. Anthony talked about Entity Resolution Explainability. What we've done is we've created a plugin that integrates into Linkurious and effectively integrates Linkurious to Senzing, so we can pull out the explainability results from Senzing into the Linkurious UI, and then we can explain the results of the entity resolution within the visualization. I'm going to give you 2 examples of identifying politically exposed persons, either where it's an individual who is a PEP or where they're related to a PEP, and then we're going to do a risk scoring example. I doubt I'm going to get onto the sanctioned company demonstration because it's quite a detailed one, but I'll try my best. Okay, let's switch over to the screen share. Hopefully you can all see this. So this is the Linkurious dashboard. So this is where you would land when you open up Linkurious. You've got options here to create new visualizations. Here you can search using a semantic search capability, or you can go into what we're about to go into here is alerts. So alerts are custom Cypher queries that you can execute against the underlying Neo4j database, and you can schedule them to run on a periodic basis, so every 5 minutes, every 5 hours, every 5 days, etc. Now, in order to demonstrate the plugin, I am going to just run one of the alerts that I've created, which is to show highly resolved entities. Now, a highly resolved entity is an entity with effectively lots of source records have been resolved together to say that they are either the same or similar. Now, this is the first time that you're seeing the data model, so I'm going to just give you a quick explanation of it. These blue nodes here are company entities, and these are created by Senzing and synchronized into the Neo4j graph database. The visualization you're seeing here is a visualization of the data in Neo4j via Linkurious. Now, what we've got here is that the blue records are company entities being created by Senzing. as are the orange-yellow colour ones, which are person entities. Everything else is source records. So these are source records that have been linked together. So you can see here, company JTL has multiple source records linked to it. Now, what we've developed is a plugin for explaining the entity resolution results. Plugins are small web applications that you can develop within Linkurious and deploy them on the Linkurious server, and they can then be accessed via a URL. We can then create what's called a custom action in order to call that URL, passing information from your visualization. So for example, if I want to explain the entity resolution results of JTL, and I call the Explain Entity Resolution plugin, it launches our web application, which we've created. And you can see here, it's taken JTL, which was the main entity, and it's given us the records that match it fully and the records that possibly match it. So the full matches are the ones at the top. I can select 2 of these and go for a row-by-row comparison of the data attributes that exist on those source nodes and extract from Senzing, via Senzing's API, the match scores to determine, the decision as to whether, why it resolved those entities in the first place, those source records in the first place. So you can see here that, we have 4 records from Companies House, the England and Wales Charity Commission, Local Data Company, and Experience Business Views. So there's 4 source records. And if we were to compare the Companies House and England and Wales Charity Commission record, we can see here that we had a full 100% match on address, on the postcode, on the company registration number, on the company name, and the record type. If I was to compare that with the local data company version, you can see here we had 100% on postcode and name, with a slight drop off in the match percentage on the address, but still very good, enough for it to be deemed to be a match. Now, in terms of possible matches, these are where there is not a strong enough match between the source records for it to be deemed a full match, but there is information that they share that is common, which means that they are possibly matched. Now, we don't have the confidence, but we want to have a look at them anyway. So you can see out of these, there are 4 person records and 1 company record. I want to compare the company record, which is Compex Certification Limited. I can clearly see that they have different CRNs, which is a company registration number in Companies House in the UK. But they do have different names as well. So they're not the same company, but they do share an address and they do share a postcode. And they're obviously both companies registered in the UK. So there is some similarities. That lead me to go back into the graph and investigate why they're similar. So I can see here Compex Certification Limited and JTL, and I can see the link between them as an ownership. So I can see that Compex Certification Limited was owned by JTL. So that explains why these are sort of similar or related entities. But they obviously share an address, which is why it flagged up in the entity resolution process. So I wanted to show you that so that, because we're going to use the Explainability plugin a couple of times in this demonstration. So the next thing I'm going to show you is in our alerts. I've created some alerts already for politically exposed persons. So this one is where the individual is a politically exposed person, and this one is where they're linked to a politically exposed person. So if I run this alert, I'm brought back 2 results. I can click one of the IDs, and this opens up the visualization. So this is the Senzing node, so a person entity. If I double click it, I can see the related source records. I've got one here from Open Sanctions. Okay, so you can see data source Open Sanctions, and I've got one here from Experience Business View. So I have two source records. I should say this is real data, so we are working real data. But obviously this is from public data sources. So again, there's nothing personal or sensitive here. And I'm not in any way suggesting that any of these individuals are in any way of higher risk than anyone else. But yeah, so you can see here the entity resolution. Let's explain the entity resolution for these 2 individuals. We can see that they match on date of birth. They match partial date of birth match as well. They have a good name match. So we can see here that there's obviously a Baroness title in the full name, but that's still enough for us to be confident in the match. Some organisations will be happy with a name and partial date of birth match. We're doing a PEP match. Some won't, so we may want to do some further investigation into this to try and validate that we think this is the same person. The one thing I will show you here is on open sanctions. It's pulled back that indeed this person is a politically exposed person, as we can see a topic role.pep, and we can see here that Sheila Hollins was the Member of the House of Lords and President of the British Medical Association. Now, if I was to have a look here at this network, I can clearly see that Sheila Hollins in our Experian data source was an officer of, inactive, I should say, so a director of the British Medical Association within this data set. So this is clearly the same individual, and the alert has clearly identified that indeed that Sheila Hollins in this data set is a politically exposed person, and that was identified by the entity resolution process in Senzing. Now, what if it's more complicated? What if we weren't looking at specifically at PEPs, but those who have a relationship to a politically exposed person? So we found one case in our data set here. Now, if I double click this person entity node, I can actually see that there's 3 source records linked to this. We've got Jessica Sainsbury. Now, if I look, this is the open sanctions record. And if I look down at the topic, this is not a PEP. So this is the role is RCA. So this individual is not a politically exposed person, but the little one on the icon here shows that there is another related entity, which I can expand. And I can see here the family relationship that suggests that Jessica is a child of, so you can see here, relationship child of Tim Sainsbury. And Tim, if I look at the open sanctions record here, is a British politician born in 1932, parliamentary under secretary, etc. Which does suggest that indeed that that she is related to this politically exposed person. Now, just to validate, are we comfortable with the entity resolution results? Again, we can launch our explanation tool. We can compare very high match on the date of birth, name and nationality. We often see partial dates of birth in some of the data sources, particularly in Companies House, which is why we fed partial dates of birth into our entity resolution process, because not all data sources hold a full date of birth, but it's still sufficient for us to to validate a match, and it's much better than only using name-only matching. And we can see here that they match on name, nationality, and record type. And again, if I check the third source, Experian Business View, we're getting a very, very good match again across name, date of birth. One other thing I did want to show as part of the demo was, how we can extend and customize the Linkurious interface, to access external links. So, for example, for anybody who has a Wikidata ID, we've created a custom action that allows you to look up Wikidata directly, so you can do that straight from the user interface. And we've done, created a number of these. So, for example, this one is a Companies House record, so we can look up Companies House directly, which is the corporate registry in the UK. And we've done this for things like Google Maps, so you can look up addresses on Google Maps. I'm going to test this one just to see. Look up Google Maps, and sometimes you have to hit search. And it can take you in and show you where the building is on a map. So it's quite nice in order to be able to customize your solution, to allow you to access and verify the sources of third-party data. Okay, so conscious of time, the next thing I'm going to show you is risk scoring. Okay, so this one starts with on the Linkurious dashboard, where we've got the semantic search capability. Now I'm going to search for an individual called Trudy. I just can't remember her name. This is what happens when you get writer's block. Hang on, find it. Hush, that was the name. Okay, good. We'd always have one stumbling block. Trudy. Okay, which I think I spelled wrong, but it doesn't matter because the search is clever enough to fix my spelling mistakes. So here we go, Trudy Hirsch. So Trudy is an officer of the Southport Dramatic Club. We've got an entity resolution result here from Senzing, which is linking her to a record from Experian Business View. We've got one here from Companies House. But what we don't have is the concept of a risk score. So how high risk is Trudy based on the information that we hold within the graph? So you can see here we've got information about businesses, there are other individuals in her network, etc. We've got industry codes. Now, what if we could use all of that information within the graph in order to create a risk score or a risk profile for that customer? So what we have done is we've used the Linkurious plugin capability. We've just created a very simple risk scoring module that effectively is going to look for geographic or sector information within a customer's network, within 4 hops. So within 4 hops of an individual or a company, find me incidences of nationality, countries of registration, countries of operation, sector codes, etc., and find me the highest risk of those. Now, if I click this, what this is going to do is it's going to calculate a risk score for all of the person entities within our graph. It might take a few seconds in order to do that. So hopefully it only takes a few seconds and not a few minutes. I think it's about 260,000. There we are. Okay. So now if we go back into our visualization and I was to click Trudy and double click her, I should say we now have a medium risk calculation. There should be a medium risk calculation for the other Trudy record in our solution. So you can see here, when I click the risk score, we have a geography risk of 158 and a sector risk of 185. Now, it's looking in the network to try and find incidences of geography and sector. Now, I can see here United Kingdom is a risk score of 158, so that's why it selected that one. And the closest SIC code that I can see here is 185, so it's selected this one, and that's why it's came up with the risk score of 185 and 158 for this individual. Now, what if I was to change Trudy's nationality? Okay, so I'm going to make Trudy higher risk. So I run this, and what we should see, is that I've changed her nationality. Okay, so I now have a nationality of Somalia. All we've done with this is we've randomly allocated risk scores to countries within our graph. Similarly, we've randomly allocated risk scores to SIC codes within our graph. Every company will have their own risk ratings for each country and each sector code and each piece of reference data. Well, we've just done this randomly just to create some data scenarios that we can then demonstrate. But so you can clearly see here now that Trudy has a nationality of Somalia. So given that we've introduced a country with a risk rating of 193, what will happen when we execute the risk score calculation again? So if I run this, again, what this is doing is it's going through the graph. It's calculating the risk scores for each of the individuals by looking within 4 hops of them, finding the highest risk geographic or sector information within that network, and ultimately picking the highest risk ratings, then determining which ones are high, medium, and low. The banding for high is 350. So as long as this is above 350, and I double click her, you can see here actually, yep, she has. So this has now gone to a geographic risk of 193, which matches Somalia. Okay, and this has pushed her over the 350 banding by adding 193 to 185, and consequently, this is now a high risk customer. Now, if I was to come out of this, I just want to show you the alerts very briefly because I'm conscious again we're just about at time. In terms of the risks themselves, so you can see here that was Trudy. His risk score has increased. If I was to show you the actual underlying cipher, you can see here this is the type of the type of thing that a developer would write, attach it to the alert, and then the alert can be scheduled to run on a periodic basis. So cipher is the underlying query language for Neo4j. It's written in ASCII art, which is the notation of round brackets for nodes and square brackets for relationships. But this is a calculation here to show us people who have a risk score where effectively their risk rating has gone from it's high, but it used to be in medium and low, or it's medium, it used to be in low, so that the risk score effectively has increased, and that will return the results associated with that. Okay, so leaving 10 minutes for a Q&A. I'm going to come back to the Q&A section and invite Anthony and Jean back off of camera.
That was great, Alan.
And
Thank you so much.
Hopefully you all enjoyed that and it made sense.
All right, thanks, Alan. So just as a reminder, if you want to go ahead and submit your questions, you can do so now also in the Q&A section of your screen. Alan, we've got a lot for you, so maybe you want to take another sip of your water. The first question, our data is stored in multiple databases and is not of high quality. In such a scenario, would your solution still deliver value, or will it result in a messy and useless graph? How clean does my data need to be for your solution to work?
So the cleaner the data, the more accurate the entity resolution. And this is why we embed data quality checks and standardization and enrichment as part of the ingestion layer. So it is very important that we improve the quality of the data where possible. You know, and when I showed you the reference architecture, there was very much a call out there for data quality. And this would be the first step in the process. We'd look to make sure that your data is well structured, well conformed, consistent. We'd use reference data, for example, to cleanse addresses and standardize addresses, because all of that will improve the results of entity resolution, improve the match rates within your graph. But if your data is of poor quality, you know, you'll still get value from this. And interestingly, once you've you know, as long as you have some attribution that matches across your data sets, what you can then do, and you know, the really interesting thing is do the comparisons between your internal and third-party data, and use that as a mechanism to determine whether your internal data is accurate, and use that as a data quality exercise.
All right. Next question here. How complex is the implementation of the entity resolution module? Is it something that can be tweaked or configured by internal resources based on our own business rules or not?
So based on our implementation experience, I would say it was very easy. And it was one of the attractive, you know, the attractive things about Senzing is that we could integrate it into our pipeline. A lot of the hard work and the thought process around integration had already been done. And one of the things we definitely did was test that we could configure it and change it, because we recognized that not every customer will have the same set of rules. Although Senzing have done a lot of work to, you know, to hit that 95% of the rules, there may be some tweaking that's required, and we wanted to validate that we could do that, and we have done that. So you could see things like partial date of birth we introduced as a rule, because we wanted to show that when we were matching against things like Companies House, where we only had a partial date of birth, that was still included as an attribute that we could match on for entity resolution.
Alan, to add on to the question, Senzing has been designed with what we call principle-based entity resolution. So it's a kind of a macro approach to how we do the rules and scoring to make it really flexible. And furthermore, to get started, we have publicly available mappers that we have published. So if you do want to look at open sanctions or open corporates, some of those illustrative demo mappers are there for you to use and experiment. So hopefully to make it really easy.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. All right, next question. What is Aptitude's role in the implementation?
So Aptitude acts as a data integrator. So ultimately, we've put the thought process in behind how we integrate these best of breed technologies, and we've created some accelerators and integrations that allow them to effectively talk to each other. So absolutely, we would act as a data integrator. We don't provide the data. So again, you would work with your data providers. We can provide integration into to different technology components. So if you've got a client lifecycle management tool, etc., we would do the integration into that. But yeah, absolutely, we're the systems integrator.
And I guess in line with that, there's another question on how long would it actually take a typical implementation? How long would it take?
How long's a piece of string? Depends on the complexity, I guess, of the organization. But we can run POCs very quickly in lower environments, non-production environments, so a couple of months in order to get something up and running. We've done a lot of the hard work to create these, to create these accelerators. But no implementation really should take longer than 6 to 12 months in production, given the work that we've already done in order to create this reference architecture.
Great. Looks like we've got a few minutes left. So next question. Does the solution restrict certain data providers, or can we use existing data licenses?
You can absolutely use existing data licenses. So the whole point in this architecture is that we can use any data as long as it has some semblance of structure, and we can model it. Then we can integrate it. So yeah, we can work with any data provider. Absolutely.
And where in our KYC process would your solution work?
So it's clearly it's a data platform. So within KYC, it can be easily integrated into risk scoring, alerting. We can push the results and integrate it into client lifecycle management tools, onboarding. So there is actually a degree of flexibility here in terms of how you leverage the assets, the data assets that we've collated together within this intelligent data platform.
All right. Just another question here. Does your solution work with international data?
It does, yeah, absolutely. So again, Anthony, I guess this is something you can come in on just in terms of the globalization element. I think you mentioned it earlier in your presentation, but yeah, the entity resolution capability does work with with multiple languages and scripts, etc. And I can go back to the point on we can integrate with any third-party data.
Yep. Whether names, addresses, multiple languages are covered out of the box with Senzing. Yep.
I can see one more question, I think, that's just popped up on the Q&A about how do you recommend creating a business case for required investment in data transformation? It's a really interesting question, this one, actually, because we've gone through this process multiple times. So very much, the business case element of it is something that is actually quite powerful when you start to look at it. We've got the operational efficiencies, which are discussed already around moving to away from periodic reviews to perpetual KYC. So there's a huge business case there in terms of driving efficiencies into these fraud and financial crime programs. But the interesting part in terms of building the business case is the other use cases that you have for your data in terms of deduplicating customer records, building a customer master, intelligent recommendations in terms of improving your marketing data, in terms of outreach to customers. There's a huge variety of use cases that you could effectively build into your business case, and that's obviously something we'd be more than happy to help with.
All right. It looks like there's another question here. Can this be used for non-financial crime use cases?
Yeah. Great question. Sorry, I'm conscious I'm answering all the questions, Jean. And
I was actually going to help out. Just a quick word to say that indeed we've seen clients apply the same sort of approach to other use cases. I'm thinking about supply chain analytics, medical research, also national security. We are already talking about an approach that can be scaled to multiple use cases in multiple industries here.
All right, there was another question here. Does the platform support multiple languages such as Arabic, etc.?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've covered that one.
Let's see if there's one more. All right. Who would support the solution and what level of support is provided?
So, I mean, I guess the individual technology components have their own service agreements with their customers. So you would license, obviously, directly with them. If there's a requirement for the full end-to-end process to be supported, that's obviously something we would discuss with the individual client and look at how we would construct that proposition. So, something we can be quite flexible on in terms of providing support. But yeah, that's something we could definitely look at.
All right. So it does kind of look like we're out of time for today. So again, we want to thank everyone for tuning in. And of course, to our speakers, Alan and Anthony, for your presentations. If you do have any other questions, obviously feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or would like to learn more. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.